boys and girls, today we are going to be learning about Boudicca. So our learning intention in week 2 of Romans is to evaluate the role of Boudicca. To be successful, we're going to identify why she was considered a heroine, analyse a historical source, consider the writer and their possible motives or opinions, and begin to consider the idea of bias. Let's start. So some key vocabulary. So we have female empowerment, Boudicca, heroine, bias, source, and we have symbolised too. Just to recap, who were the Romans and why did they invade Britain? So pause the video now and have a think. Think back to last week. What did you learn last week about why the Romans came over to Britain, and then come back. Right, what did you remember? Did you remember that they came over for the resources because Britain was rich of lots of different resources such as corn and gold, etc. And also they wanted to show the world that they were really powerful. They wanted to also prove a point. So let's watch a small short clip. So where did the Romans come from?
Well, it might surprise you to know that not all Romans were from Rome. I mean, yes, originally they would have come from Rome, which we now know is the capital city of Italy, but by the time they invaded what we now call Britain, the Roman army was truly multicultural, with troops from as far away as the Middle East and Africa, as well as lands they'd conquered along the way, like France, or Gaul, as it was known back then. How do we know all this? Well, we know for a start that Emperor Claudius brought elephants over with him to scare the natives. Now, I'm no wildlife expert, but I know that elephants do not come from Italy. And since there was no wildlife documentaries at the time, imagine what the natives must have thought. An elephant must have seemed like something from a different planet. There's also evidence of African pots being used in what we now call Scotland. These finds are another indicator that the Roman army was comprised of more than one nationality.
Okay, so that's some interesting information. Let's carry on. So what was Britain like before and after the Romans? So before the Romans invaded Britain, life in Britain was very different. So let's watch another short clip to find out. The life in Celtic Britain.
This is Boudicca Farm, a 30-year-old project researching the British Iron Age, the time of the Celts. When people come to Boudicca, they learn a lot about the Celts and the Celtic way of life. Before the Romans came, we're looking at a very different sort of countryside, covered in small settlements. It was made up of fields and woods and pastures, so try and put in your mind this sort of patchwork of different colours of greens scattered across the whole countryside. The Celts were a warrior-based society, but they were very, very good farmers, and this led to an enormous amount of trade. Life in a Celtic village revolved around the production of food. If they weren't able to produce food, they starved. It's very seasonal work, and even the building and maintenance of houses depended on doing it at the right time of year. During the summer, all effort was spent on looking after the crops. In the autumn, that was the time to sort the animals out and decide which ones you wanted to keep through the winter. And during the winter, that was the time to cut the wood. There is very little evidence of Celtic houses in modern times because they were built out of wood and straw, and that all rots away to nothing. At Boudicca, there are all sorts of activities. We learn about the differences between life lived under an empire, which is still very similar to what we do today, and life before the arrival of an empire, when there wasn't a nation. People lived a lot closer to the earth. They used natural materials to do all their building, and everything was based on farming.
So that's really interesting. So that was what life was like before the Romans invaded Britain. So, a big question. Think about this question. Which famous females do you know of? So think back to Key Stage 1, so maybe in year 1 and 2, what did you learn? So do Do you recall these pictures, images? So here you may remember Mary Seacole and Florence Nightingale, Lady of the Lamp. So today you'll be learning about Boudicca and why she was important. The Boudicca, so some people pronounce this as Boudicca, some people pronounce it as Boudicca. So who was in Britain before the Romans arrived? So the Celts were in Britain. So what do you think happened when the Romans and the Celts met? So remember, the Romans wanted to make the empire even bigger. So do you think the Celts were happy about that? Of course not. So there were mighty battles and the Romans eventually took over most of Britain. The Celts and the Romans fought numerous battles. Many Celtic tribes tried to resist the Romans and were led by fierce warriors. One such a leader was a formidable lady, and her name was Queen Boudicca, or Queen Boudicca. What do you know about Boudicca or Boudicca? Her appearance, her life, her actions. Remember back in the days there were no cameras or we couldn't record anything apart from through drawings and writing things down. And do you think all the resources provide the same description of the person and events? Because this happened so long ago. So today you will be a historian using different resources collecting information about Boudicca. You need to find out information about Boudicca's life, Boudicca's character. So what kind of life did she lead and what kind of person was she? What was her personality like? Using the resources, explain why Boudicca was important. So you may want to jot down a few notes in your lockdown book while we watch this clip of Boudicca.
Boudicca. In Britain, we rule ourselves. But in the past, other countries wanted to rule Britain, and people had to fight to stop them. People like the warrior queen Boudicca, who fought when the Romans came to rule. We don't know much about Boudicca because she lived many years ago, and only two people called Tacitus and Dio wrote about her at the time. But their stories were very different. Boudicca was married to Prasutagus, the king of the Iceni in eastern England. Back then, parts of Britain were ruled by the Roman Empire. Prasutagus trusted the Romans and promised to leave half his land to them and half to Boudicca. But when he died, the Romans took everything and were very cruel to Boudicca and her two daughters. In the year 60, Boudicca fought to take back her land. The Roman army was fighting in North Wales, too far away to save the Roman towns that Boudicca's army attacked. Her army destroyed the towns of St Albans, Colchester and London and killed thousands of people. But when the Roman army returned, it tricked Boudicca's army into a narrow valley where it was trapped and beaten. This was called the Battle of Watling Street, and afterwards Rome ruled most of Britain for 350 years. Nobody knows for sure how Boudicca died, but archaeologists, scientists who dig up buried objects from the past, have found things that help us understand her story, like the burnt soil in Colchester, where she destroyed the city. Outside the Houses of Parliament in London, there is a statue of Boudicca. It reminds us that she was brave and fierce and refused to be ruled by another country.
Okay, so that was lots of interesting information for you to think about when you write your reports. So, do you think these qualities, the qualities that Boudicca had, are still needed today? So, do you think women or women leaders, queens need these qualities, such as standing up for what they believe in, being powerful, having a voice, and so on? So what do you think? I suppose everybody needs to stand up for what they believe in, and would you allow somebody to take over your land, your home? Probably not. So you probably would stand up for yourself as well. So let's carry on. Why do you think these representations of Boudicca are different? So here you've got 4 different images. So remember, these are probably paintings. So here you've got Boudicca. Here she looks like quite a gentle soul, doesn't she? she's raising her hand. And then here, she's looking quite fierce and she's got a spear in her hand, a cloak. And then here again, she's got her hair out, looking quite strong and powerful on a carriage. And then here, she's like almost charging along. She's ordering everybody. She's pointing a finger to where she's going. And she's on a carriage. So think about how she's depicted in these images. What kind of facial expressions can you see and her body language? What does this make you think of Boudicca? I think she comes across as a very powerful woman. She believed that nobody had a right to take over her land, and the Romans took everything that belonged to her after her husband died, and they didn't stick to the agreement that her husband had with them, and she decided to put a stop to it, and she fought for what she believed in. Now, here, could the artist have been biased? So what does bias mean? So bias means that a person prefers an idea and possibly does not give equal chance to a different idea. So bias can be influenced by a number of factors, so a number of things, such as how popular you are. For example, a person might be biased towards a particular person because they are their friend. So can you give me an example of when you might be biased? You may say that your mum's cooking is the best cooking in the world. And that may be because you may be biased because she's your mum. And somebody else may say the same thing about their mum, and they may be biased because they are related. So because they are related and they are their mum. The only source of written evidence we have of Boudicca comes from the Roman historian Tacitus, whose father-in-law served in Britain. The account was written 50 years after the event of her death, so 50 years after Boudicca had died. How might this be biased in the description of her? So let's analyse this together. So according to Tacitus, Boudicca made a speech and said these words. So remember, Tacitus was a Roman historian, so his point of view is going to be different to a Celtic historian. He says, "We British," so he said that apparently Boudicca said, "We British are used to women commanders in war. I'm descended from mighty men, but I'm not fighting for my kingdom and wealth now. I'm fighting as an ordinary person for my lost freedom, my bruised body and my outraged daughters. Consider how many of you are fighting and why. Then you will win this battle or perish. That is what I, a woman, plan to do. Let the men live in slavery if they will." So do you think Boudicca really made this speech? Do you think some of the words have been slightly changed? What's your point of view? So remember, today we're evaluating the role of Boudicca. Your task is to write a report about Boudicca, and you need to choose some suitable subheadings and some keywords from your. Choose suitable subheadings and include some keywords from your research. And the challenge is to, in your report, explain why it is difficult to know exactly what Boudicca was like. So remember, this event happened almost 2,000 years ago. So here's a suggested plan. So include a title, introduce Boudicca, maybe a subheading such as Boudicca's character, like what she was like. Maybe she was fierce, maybe she was strong, powerful. Another subheading about Boudicca's life, maybe who she was married to, where she lived. She was part of the Iceni tribe. And a conclusion, why was she so important? And then once you've done your activity, your plenary is, can you think of any sources nowadays that might be biased and why? So think about any newspapers, any channels you may watch, and think about why they may be biased. So here is your topic task sheet. You'll find this on the Year 3 page of our website. To evaluate the role of Boudicca, gives you the task and a suggested plan, title, introduction, subheadings, and a conclusion, and then the challenge, like I mentioned before. And then here, you've also got facts about Boudicca. You have this on the Year 3 page as well, and some information for you. Maybe you'd like to do your own research. Think about how did the Romans see Boudicca and how did the Celts? How did the Celtic historians view Boudicca? So their point of views would be very different. Now, so once you've written your report, check it against success criteria. Make sure you've got lots of bullet points, maybe include a picture, use interesting words, make it really interesting. Good luck. I'd love to see all your lovely writing. Please make it really awesome, and I hope to see you soon.